So one of the examples that I feel really shows some of the stylistic pedaling, and I think that really has to do with two things. Knowing how much sustained pedal that you want to use, whether it's a quarter, a half, a full pedal, and then also how to release it. Is it going to be a fast release? Is it going to be kind of with your hands? Is it going to be after your hands? All of that timing of the release is really a huge factor in stylistic pedaling. So one of the examples that I think shows it really well, where we need to have kind of it can't be the fastest release, but it needs to be kind of in the middle, is this impromptu in A flat by Schubert. As you can hear, I not only have to diminuendo the endings of these phrases so that I don't bump them, but also I have to be very careful with how I release the pedal. If I release it too quick, we get a clip. Like that, where it's clipped. The sound is clipped. Not just because of my fingers releasing quickly, because it does have a staccato or something at the end of the slur, but because the foot came up and the dampers went down on the strings and immediately shut the sound off. So trying to avoid that sort of clip. Right, without it also hanging over. Everything's blending together now. So you don't want one way or the other. It has to be just right in the middle. Sometimes with little kids, I use the story of Goldilocks and the Three Bears, you know, where one had a chair that was too small or a chair that was too big, and one chair is just right. And that's an analogy that they really get. And so trying to find just the right amount of release. In this case, it has to be a pretty fast release, but not a clip. So it is quite a tricky thing. They'll practice it for quite some time before they can handle that. The middle section is a really good example of having to pedal for right hand. Oftentimes we pedal for left hand because we pedal harmony changes. But oftentimes we've got a moving melody line with those harmony changes underneath, and we're really pedaling for right hand. We have to really change the pedal. Otherwise it gets really blurry. If I don't pedal those spots, I just do the harmony. The whole dynamic of the section is supposed to be piano. So you've already kind of killed the piano with having all that pedal resonance going on. So the best way in this part of the piece is to use maybe about a half pedal, because we, again, don't want those inner voices to come out too much. We want them to be in the background. But then we're also going to change the frequency of the pedal. So there's two ways to control the pedal. Use less of it. In other words, it doesn't have to be 100 miles an hour, maybe 50 miles an hour, or maybe even 25 miles an hour. And then making sure that you change it often. Those are the two things that affect it the most. But that is a specialized type of pedaling that when we really need to change for a lot of melody notes, especially in music with thicker textures like Brahms, and we're going to need to change the pedal more often and use less of it. Another specialized pedaling would be maybe the waltz pedal, that they'd probably meet a little sooner, actually, even than that Haydn sonata. But now we're moving into classical and maybe early romantic music. In general, people overpedal romantic music. Really important that we have a little space, especially at the end of the measure. It depends on what type of 3/4 piece you're playing. A lot of waltzes lend themselves to this, but even some mazurkas. But mazurkas can have a slightly different metric pulse to them. We keep the pedal down, and we want to lift it with the third beat. And it's the release of the pedal that becomes very tricky here. Same in Baroque music, although Baroque music's a little more forgiving because when you strum those big chords, you can let it ring. But here, it can't be too long and it can't be too short. If it's too short, we get a clip. Like that. If it's too long, then you really haven't let it go at all. Right? So it takes a very slow release with the foot. But it's nice to have that little breath at the end of the measure to get you ready for the next measure without it running all together. Running all together sounds like this. You can tell already it's getting a little muddy. Especially if you have a student who's not releasing the pedal all the way. If they're only releasing it a little bit, like if you do with quarter pedal, then it's going to be mushier. Or full pedal, you know, and you're just letting it up a little bit. And you're not doing a full change. So it is a big issue. Especially, I mean, that's a very early waltz that kids play.